What's up, guys? This is Zelric. I'm going to be going over the 0.3.0 patch notes a little bit, not all of them. If you want to go look for them yourselves, they're right on the main page of the Path of Exile website. Not going to leave a link because I feel like everybody can go find that. And there's a bunch of other much bigger creators that have looked over the entire list and given like breakdowns of everything. What I want to go through today is very specifically towards the build I play right now, the main build of the channel, the one that has gotten the most views on my channel, which doesn't matter, but that's the one build I currently play that I'm going to be league starting again to just know the changes and stuff. That's my Artillery Ballista build for the Tactician that I played last season. There's been a few changes to the build. I can't know everything right now just because we don't have the passive tree. And again, I'm sorry for sounding a bit weird. I'm a bit congested. Season change is coming up, so every time season change comes around, my sinuses and everything starts acting up. I've got a cold. Regardless, there is some pretty big changes, I would say. A lot of nerfs, actually, specifically to this build, or at least seeming nerfs right now. Because we don't have the whole picture, we have a few pieces of the picture. It seems like a nerf on the surface if you read some of the adjusted numbers, but when you place everything where it's going to be, I imagine it will be an overall either buff or static change with a lot of quality of life improvements. They have changed fundamentally, first of all, the Tactician. A little, not fundamentally, but they have improved on the Tactician a lot, I feel like. Cannons ready. Didn't lose the totems now fire, like focus fire basically, where they only fire when you fire. That hasn't changed, but they did add the upside of it giving one maximum totem. They also added, right behind that, is added a new strategic embankments notable, which requires the cannons ready. So now it's a 4-point node instead of just cannons ready. It's now there's another 2-pointer right behind it that gives your ballistas, which we'll go into the name changes here, but they give your ballistas changes. It basically makes your ballista do what Siege Cascade used to, which it doesn't do this anymore, but increase damage based off of immobilized enemies. And then your other ballista, which we may now have to use, we may have to use both of these, is increased mobilization build up. So that'll be cool. We'll have to experiment with that to see. They've also changed banners. We'll have to see if that helps or not. They've improved them greatly. They are much more reliable as buffs. So before they were very not reliable because you had to build up this Valor stat for them to work. You had to then plant them and they wouldn't stay if you walked out of them, and they wouldn't stay for very long even there. But now you can just plant it and it stays there for a long time, and the buff is better apparently. So we may have to look into banners. But regardless, that's the main two things for this, alongside the +1 to summon totems on this. They've changed right where we want them to be just projectile damage builds pin. So if we look at, let's look at Path of Exile Community 2. Let's look at the current version and see if we can like match this stuff up. This is the build I currently have. So here's cannons ready as we say it now. 30% more skill speed. It's now going to have that and the +1 to summon to maximum number of summon totems. So it's probably going to be pretty mandatory. I don't know if the next two nodes will be mandatory to take, but I imagine in a Artillery Ballista build on the Tactician, it'll be mandatory. Right where we want them will no longer cause enemies to not perform actions, I guess. Unless I read that wrong. Right where we want them now grants projectile damage pin, or builds pin. So, but it doesn't say they removed its ability to have them stop fully. So, is that just means they changed? I imagine that means they changed it completely. No, now also grants projectile damage builds pin. I see. Okay. So this node is both of these at once, and I'm guessing they've just squished them. Suppressing fire notable now provides 40% more immobilization buildup instead of projectile damage builds pin. No, they didn't squish them. Okay. Do we know what immobilization is? Is that pin buildup, I guess? Or is that different from pin buildup? I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. Anyway, I've never seen that. But you get a lot of it now because of the different notables that we have that we may want. But anyway, that means that right where we want them is even better. So you're going to be getting suppressing fire and that immobilization buildup. I'm going to guess this encapsulates pin buildup as well. It's maybe just a more broad term for that. Alongside the quality of life changes of weapon swapping now being instant. So now we can better utilize a weapon swap for certain things. Probably like curses and maybe shocking. Applying a better shock. Things of that nature, alongside new skills like mortar cannon, which we'll probably add. They did change where you can no longer put multiple instances of the same skill gem like we were doing. They also reduce mana costs, so mana might not be as big of an issue. Tactician now gets the banner node that changes it to where it's you can place multiple banners you can place an unlimited amount of banners, which is cool. I wanted to find the little node that said. I'll find the damage number nerfs and stuff in a second, but I wanted to find the thing that said that you can no longer place multiple of the same skill gem in your skill gem sockets. I might not be able to find it. Anyway, yeah, you can only have one instance of any one skill other than certain meta skills like Spectre and things of that nature that require multiple of the same skill, but in that case, you can only have one of each monster, they said. So you have to have different specters, I guess, for each monster. A different specter gem for each monster. But neither here nor there. So we can no longer have a artillery ballista set up for clear and one set up for like big boss monster, basically. We can't have both anymore. So, but one of the biggest changes coming to this league is the fact that you can use supports on as many things as you want. It's not limited to one anymore. One support for one skill. You can have as many as you want. So you can use martial tempo on everything. You can use whatever you want to think about. You can use it on anything, which is really cool. That definitely changes the dynamic. That means that we'll probably want to add things like mortar cannon to our build, because it's going to be, I imagine, a totem. So if we want to go full into totems and making them do damage, we're going to want to do that. I don't know what grenade specifically. It depends on what I want to do. They did change how ignite works as well. They made it to where skills that inherently ignite things no longer do that. That implies a flammability debuff, I think is what they said. And then when the flammability, which I can probably control F, the flammability part, here it is. Flammability. Fire damage no longer inherently has a chance to ignite. Instead, it inflicts flammability on the enemy, which is kind of what I said in a previous video. I said, as an improvement to Wildfire, the skill gem that causes your ignites to spread, I said if they could stand next to them and get like a covered in ash debuff that ignites after a minute or a second, that would be cool. But it's not exactly that concept, but it is, but for all fire damage. Inflicts flammability on the enemy based on the damage dealt. Flammability is a debuff that lasts 4 seconds and grants all fire damage against the enemy, including the hit that applied the flammability, a chance to ignite that enemy equal to their flammability magnitude. I'm going to guess this is changed and we'll have some flammability nodes on the passive tree. That's another thing we don't know yet, is all the specifics on the passive tree that has changed. All the new notables and all the different clusters that have changed. We'll have to go and see. but I'm excited. They also, one of the biggest changes was that your totems are now based off of your weapon damage. They no longer have their own base stats. They are based off of your stat. Well, they do have their own base stats, but their attack damage is based off the weapon that you have, which it was not before, and that kind of caused some confusion and jank. So now it will. So that means that you have more scaling vectors now. So because the reason why the build felt kind of lackluster is because there really wasn't great ways to scale your build other than just getting a bunch of gem levels. Whereas now, with how the weapons work, it will actually matter what is on the weapon. Before, the biggest upgrade you could get was just some plus to levels and then a big ass, Fizzbow, basically, was what gave you the biggest buff. But now, because of these changes, it might be better to get an elemental bow. Now, skill gems will still be great, but it won't be the only way you can get this done, and I'm hoping that change will kind of negate the slight buffs, the slight nerfs that the totems took in damage. Let's go look at Siege Cascade first, because I was using that as... Okay, here we go. Artillery Ballista has now been renamed to Siege Ballista, and now has a duration of... So they nerfed the amount of time that it's baseline out. Massively nerfed the base attack speed. I think it was 100%. Maybe it wasn't. I don't. Bolt attack speed is now 25% of base. Yeah. Massively nerfed. Bolts now deal not a shitload less damage, but a little less damage. Which bolts were never the main bulk of the damage for Artillery Ballista anyway. And now it has less AoE, and the explosion does a little bit less damage. I think these are all to account for the fact that they did add weapon damage to the Siege Ballista. And I imagine it will be an overall buff. Now, I don't know that for sure. I'm hoping, that's me hoping that the weapon damage makes up for the loss in base damage that we're getting hit with. But that's not the only change. So Siege Ballista is what we were using before. Now, Ripwire Ballista is now the new Artillery Ballista. Has been renamed to the Artillery Ballista, and it now fires a hail of bolts into the air, landing in an area and hitting all enemies within that area. So basically, it's Siege Cascade before a ballista. Whereas before, the Artillery Ballista would fire one and come down and be one big explosion. That still exists in Siege Cascade, but now, or Siege Ballista, now Artillery Ballista is multiple fires, multiple hits and explosions. Obviously, they all do less damage than they were before. Ripwire Ballista has basically been removed from the game. It didn't really get use anyway. I didn't see a point in using a utility ballista over using other ballistas that when it took up an entire ballista slot. Sorry, I'm saying the word ballista a shitload. Don't be drinking and saying to how many times I say ballista in this video. Siege Cascade. Here we go. Here's the other big change for our build. Impacts. They buffed the impact and the explosion damage baseline by quite a bit, actually. But that's because it no longer deals 200% extra damage, or more damage, against immobilized enemies. It no longer has a 100% less stun build-up against enemies. It no longer converts physical damage to fire, or has the payoff or fire gem tags. So payload radius. So it's no longer. It's just a physical damage skill now. So honestly, if we may just drop Siege Cascade altogether. We're gonna have to see how it feels. But if we're going for an ignite based build, if like I want to be using more ignites to deal more damage in whatever capacity, that's kind of what I was going for, then I may switch Siege Cascade to being Incendiary Bolt, because that was always what I wanted to use, but it didn't really work per se, because it just It didn't do enough damage. It didn't ignite things. It felt bad to me, so I just never used it. So I opted in for Siege Cascade due to the nature of Siege Cascade and the nature of Tactician. They just seemed to play so well together that I couldn't ignore doing that combo. But these are like the biggest things. I'm hoping the ability to use your weapons damage in with totems means that it will just be an overall buff to damage, even with the less damage numbers. And Siege Cascade may end up being still better overall than any other option, even if it is a physical skill and not a fire-based skill. We'll have to go ahead and see. I may have to ignite with like my weapon swap and just do it that way. We'll have to see. But until the tree gets updated, the tree info gets dropped, and the PoE2 can be updated, there really isn't much I can do. It's just to kind of to go over some of the major changes. There's a couple others in here that might affect our build a little bit, like the new skills mortar. I imagine mortar cannon might obviously go into the build. I will probably see how to fit it in since we can't have multiple artillery ballistas. I imagine both siege ballista and mortar ballista or mortar cannon will go into the build. Anyway, thanks for hearing me ramble for however long this has been. I appreciate everybody. Please like and subscribe if you liked the video. Dislike it if you didn't. I appreciate anybody and everybody that's here. Leave comments about what you think and different changes you would make or different comments on what you think, whatever. I love interacting with you guys, so it's always a pleasure. Thanks. Peace out, guys.